Let's talk about the technique for parallel parking. The secret of successful parking lies in the starting position of the car. 50% of your success depends on it. If your car is positioned correctly before parking maneuvers, you will be able to drive even into a narrow and at first glance inconvenient parking space. But if the initial position is incorrect, the process of parking will be much harder. Let's consider parallel parking situated on the right side of the road. The starting position is as follows. You pass by a parking space and stop parallel to the car parked in front of it. The lateral distance should be between 2 and 3 feet, and the steering wheel must be in a straight forward position. There is no point in driving too far forward, but stop when your car is next to the car parked in the front of the parking space. From such a position, it is the easiest way to park. Now, direct the right side mirror downward. You will use it to guide you in parking the car parallel to the curb. To drive into the parking place, you need to turn the steering wheel 3 times. Hence, we divided the parallel parking into 3 steps. First, you need to turn the steering wheel all the way to the right, then put it into the straight forward position, and finally turn the steering wheel all the way to the left. Please note that we never turn the steering wheel 2 times in the same direction. So once again, right, straight, and left. Remember that you need to move slowly and to turn the steering wheel quickly. Now let us examine the steps of parallel parking one after another. The first step. The car is in its starting position. The driver looks over his shoulder through the triangular window of the back door and drives backwards in a straight line. When the back end of the car on its right appears in that window, he turns the wheel to the right. Our car starts to back into the space. The second step. The driver looks into the left side mirror. When the right-hand corner of the car parked behind you appears in it, the driver puts the steering wheel into the straight forward position. The car moves in a straight line. Now we have given direction to the car and its back end approaches the curb. The third step. The driver looks at the right side mirror. When it covers the tail light of the car in front, the driver turns the steering wheel to the left. Now our car is inside the parking space, and we only need to put it parallel to the curb. For this purpose, it is convenient to use the side mirror, which we had directed downwards in advance. And then drive to the middle of the parking space. Now, let's examine the parallel parking technique in greater detail, and more importantly, talk about why we have made this or that maneuver. Let's start from the beginning. Step 1. We need to pass safely the car in front and direct our car into the parking space. How is it done? The driver turns the steering wheel when the back wheel of his car has reached the back end of the vehicle next to him. The driver knows that moment with the help of the triangular window on the back door. If you turn the steering wheel when the back wheel is in the correct turning point, you will never bump into a nearby car and will go around it safely. So we managed to steer our car into the space. Step 2. Now we need to move the car along a diagonal of the parking space and bring it closer to the curb. When we see in the left side mirror the right-hand corner of the car parked behind, we turn the steering wheel to the straightforward position. Now we have our car at an optimal angle in reference to the curb, and from this position it is easier for us to finish the parking process. Step 3. When the right side mirror covers the taillight of the car in front, it means that the back end of our car is near enough to the curb, and it's time to pull there the front end of our vehicle. Now we have enough free space in front of us, and if you turn the steering wheel to the left, the front end of our car will squeeze to the curb, and the car will stand parallel to the edge of the road. Once you are parallel to the curb, immediately put the steering wheel into a straightforward position. If necessary, you can now move forward or backward, putting your car in the middle of the parking space while not losing parallelism. At each step, try to repeat exactly the action shown here. Why? As an example, let's consider a mistake on the second step. If you're late in turning the steering wheel, or if you turn it too slowly, your car will be moving towards the curb at too great an angle, resulting in the back wheel touching the curb, and you won't have time to align the car with the curb. In such a situation, it is simpler if you drive out of the parking space and try to park again than to maneuver within it, for you have too little space in the front and you cannot use the space behind because it is limited by the curb. Such errors occur due to carelessness or unwillingness to act. In order to avoid making mistakes, think through the actions in advance. Here you should always be guided by the principle of first think and then do. Remember that when parallel parking, we do not turn the steering wheel twice in the same direction. Usually mistakes occur during the last step when people somehow turn the wheel once again to the right. As a result, the car is trying to position itself at the straight angle to the curb. It is worth mentioning that the driver is not a robot, so he cannot drive into a parking space with the same accuracy every time. Besides, he orientates himself by other cars. Thus, a great deal of his success depends on the width of the other cars or how they are parked. So if something does not work, try to analyze why that is so. For example, let's see what determines the distance at which your vehicle is stopped by the curb. We divided parallel parking into 3 steps. The first 2 do not play a big role here. It all depends on the third step, that is, the point at which you turn the steering wheel to the left. If you turn the steering wheel at the right moment, the car will be stationed in an acceptable manner. A question: what do you think will happen if the driver turns the steering wheel for some reason later than necessary? If the driver turns the steering wheel too late, he won't have enough time to align the vehicle with the curb. The back wheel will hit the curb and the car will remain standing at an angle. So, when parallel parking, the most important consideration is at what point you turn the steering wheel to the left at the third step. If you do everything right, you will park at the optimal distance to the curb. If you drive too deeply into the parking space, you will hit the curb with your back wheel. On the contrary, if you turn the steering wheel too early, you will end up far away from the curb. Let us consider the later scenario in detail, because it is the most unpleasant one for the driver. So, we were too hasty and turned the steering wheel to the left too early. As a result, the car is at a great distance from the curb. It is difficult to correct the situation, as it is necessary to move forward and backward a few times, trying to drive the car closer and closer to the edge of the road. How can we do this easier? If you try to approach closer to the curb while moving forward, it is likely that you will hit it at once with your front wheel. Let us remember that the car turns better when reversing, and therefore, we can maneuver better when moving in reverse gear. For a start, let us check how much space remains in the back. In this case, there's little room for maneuver, and therefore, it makes sense to drive forward as far as possible. The best thing is to start maneuvering when the car is standing parallel to the edge of the road. We want to shift to the right, so we will turn the steering wheel to the right. We drive backwards in order to get the back end of our car to move closer to the curb. Now we turn to the left in order to squeeze the front part of the car to the curb. Thus we have approached the curb at the optimal distance. In fact, the vacant space behind the car is divided mentally into two equal parts. In the first part, the steering wheel is turned to the right, and in the second, to the left. In some cases, this procedure should be repeated several times. Note that at the rear, you have about 5 to 6 feet of space. Use this free space to the maximum. If you turn the steering wheel and drive only 5 to 10 inches, the position of the car is practically unchanged, and you would have to repeat this maneuver many times.